Welcome to Mystara, all you eight-legged freaks, for a look at one of Mystara's most iconic monsters, the Aranea. First appearing as sentient giant spiders in the immortal module Isle of Dread, they proved to be so popular they were later imported to the Savage Coast, where they were given additional powers. Well, in theory. More on that later. They were then borged into the realms and were one of the few Mystaran monsters to make it past 2nd edition. So what makes a race so good we've got two versions of them? How did they screw up so badly they brought down the wrath of the immortal patron of dragons? I'm Mr. Welch, and today we're doing whatever a spider can. Aranea appeared all the way back in 1981 as some of the baddies in the module Isle of Dread. They were sinister, they were mysterious, they were pony-sized spiders possessing oversized brains, hands on their 2 front feet, and the ability to cast magic. They were low-powered villains, unable to cast spells higher than 2nd level at first. They were the default enemy of the Phantom, and they didn't get along with the Rakasta that also lived on the island. While being presented as evil back in the day, this was later walked back by the writers. The Aranea were listed as chaotic back in Module X1, but TSR later tried to press that law didn't automatically mean good, and chaos wasn't instantly evil. Still, the Aranea were considered a villain race for quite some time. Even when they got their makeover in 2nd edition, they might not have been automatically evil, but the term criminally negligent was a good description. The Tanaroan Aranea were suggested to be numerous in the book, but in fact you're only facing 3 in the entire module as far as scripted encounters go. They use bugbears as bodyguards, reminding you that they will cooperate or hire other races to work for them. They're a primitive race by Mystaran standards, using crude tools and lodgings. They create their own homes far above ground in the jungles of Tanaroa, which can't be detected just by looking up. They don't hunt through ambushes like you'd expect them. They use their magic early and often to soften up their enemies. They will only engage in melee combat if there's no other option, even though they do have a poison bite. And this being Beck-Me era D&D, that means save or die. But they're still quite loath to get close to their enemies, hence the bodyguards. The Tanaroan Aranea were said to be found in other regions of the known world, but placing them can be difficult. They don't like intruders in their territory, especially arboreal creatures whom they view as food. Their reaction to outsiders is largely hostile, but not immediately so. They don't attack on sight, preferring to observe the trespassers from above, and if a chance to pick off a straggler arises, they won't hesitate to take advantage of the situation. Any attempt to climb the trees will result in an attack, though. Tanaroan Aranea will take whatever magic they can find. They aren't fond of fire spells for obvious reasons, but that won't stop them from learning the spells if they can find a spell book or a scroll from a victim. Typical spells are designed to incapacitate. You know web is high on that list. Damaging spells are used to hunt prey as well as to defend against trespassers. They use a large number of utility spells to make their lives easier, as well as illusion magic to hide their presence better. Any treasure they have will be magical or related to spell casting. They've got no use for gold coins, but gems are often used in the casting of spells, so you could expect to find some of those in their homes. If you wanted to use the Tanaroan Aranea outside the island, there's a few locations they can thrive in. Because they're incredibly territorial, they don't do well in areas with high populations. If they showed up in Alfheim, there's going to be a fight, which might be an adventure hook right there. Deep forests and temperate climates are the preferred locations, though a few in Glantry wouldn't be out of place. Even areas in Alphatia like Blackheart or Trollhättan would be a great place for them. If you wanted to put them in a surprising location, the northern forests of the Shires would be a good fit, as the Hen avoid the northern reaches of most of their nation. Now we head over to the Savage Coast to talk about the Harathian Aranea. If there is another living race that is screwed up as badly as the Harathians, you'd be hard-pressed to find it. In a short amount of time, they managed to unleash a curse on the surrounding lands, nearly destroy a neighbor that meant them no harm, and nearly get exterminated by one of the most powerful immortals in Mystara, all because of their distrust of other races. Harath is a nation located in the Savage Coast that was home to a race of evil and cruel spider folk that would steal children for magical experimentation and kill anyone who trespassed into their territory. Then one day, 3,000 years ago, they mysteriously disappeared without a trace, and other races moved into the land and created a place of opportunity and equality where all races live as equals. That's the official story. The actual history is much more complicated. The Aranea did settle in Harath and turned it into a spidery fantasy land where all spider folk could live in harmony, cheerfully learning new magics, happily experimenting on unwilling subjects, and gleefully hunting down any travelers who dared enter their nation. But the Aranea were coming into conflict with those neighbors, who kept devising larger and larger shoes to try and squash them with. So the Aranea researched new magic, which gave them the power to shape change into new forms, specifically elves and humans at the start. Now their neighbors would stop trying to squash them and instead approach the new people living in Harath with gifts and diplomatic missions. The Harathians in their new human forms took their neighbors' fruitcakes, thanked them, and slammed the door in their face and went back to merrily carving people up for magical research. Enter the Wallara, a rather laid-back and chill reptilian race who lived next door to the Aranea and really didn't care who their neighbor was as long as they stayed on their side of the fence. Of course, the Aranea saw the Wallara as new test subjects and started whimsically carving up prisoners to create the Shazaks, or the first modern lizard men. The Wallara naturally protested the behavior of their neighbors, so the Aranea did what any civilized race would do when confronted with their crimes. They created a spell to wipe the memory of the Wallara of any instances of Harathians kidnapping their people. Unfortunately, some Harathian forgot to carry a 1 in the magical formula, and instead of a few incidents being wiped from memory, the race's entire knowledge of everything going back to the Stone Age was erased. A modern and prosperous race suddenly had to relearn how to use fire. The Great One, the patron of all dragons in Mystara, turned out to be the patron of the Wallara as well. They were created by him and were considered his pet project. So, undoing thousands of years of cultural progress in an instant, raised some of his hackles. He could have tried to reverse the magic, expending an enormous amount of immortal magic to fix the problem, but that would run afoul of the rule prohibiting mortals from interfering in the affairs of mortals. He could have demanded the Aranea reverse the spell, but this might not have even been possible. So he took a third option. Gathering the 3 lesser draconic immortals, he called on every dragon on the continent to fly to Harath and commit genocide on a global scale. He created foul creatures like the Falong, specifically to hunt and kill Aranea. He personally cursed the region by spilling his blood across it, making everything in the region detect as magical, and making most divination spells useless. That act linked several other curses already in the area and merged them into the dreaded Red Curse that plagues the Savage Coast today. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed among the immortals, and the Great One was forced to call off the Dragonfall, and the few remaining Aranea were allowed to rebuild. Harath was practically leveled, forcing the Aranea to rebuild their nation, and then sealed their borders again to prevent their true nature from being discovered. They're still overconfident spellcasters, but the scorched stone of their older cities reminds them of the price of arrogance. Harathian Aranea possess 3 forms: Spider, Humanoid, and Spideroid. They're technically a playable race, but the Red Steel box set kind of forgets to tell you the rules for playing an Aranea, or anything else for that matter. Seriously, it gives you the stat ranges on page 7, the available classes to them on page 8, the languages they can learn on page 9 and 10, and their armor rules on page 11. It tells you to look at the monster stat block for Harathian Aranea in the back of the book, but then the book tells you just to wing it from there. There's no workable official rules for Harathian Aranea in their own book. Red Steel was a mess of continuity errors, and the racial rules are no different. Now for the monster stats of the Aranea, those are given in the Red Steel book, and copied word for word in the Sword Coast creature catalog. They have 3 forms. They can change between the forms instantly. The spider form is the stock Aranea, with the hands on the first set of legs, the enlarged brains, and gives rules for the venom, which is now 1d4 damage for 1d4 rounds, usable 3 times a day. The humanoid form is any that Aranea are familiar with. This form is chosen after the Aranea's birth and can't be changed once selected. The humanoid form can be in size from goblin to gnoll, but it only duplicates the form. It doesn't give them any special abilities. An Aranea might look like a Thule, but it wouldn't have its paralyzation or regeneration, for example. The one race they cannot assume the form of is that of the Wallara. They say it's because of a magical restriction placed upon them, but more than likely it's they don't want to anger the Great One because they're not sure their nation would survive Dragonfall 2 Draconic Boogaloo. The third form is the Demi-Spider, which gives the humanoid form 2 extra eyes, long fangs, and the ability to shoot webs out of its hand. The Aranea tells strangers this form is caused by the Red Curse, which is a plausible explanation as the curse does cause a similar mutation. Their ability to change shape at will does give them immunity to polymorph spells, as they can just change into another form the next chance they get. The Harathian Aranea's official alignment is neutral. They are a completely alien mindset to other races. They're arrogant, they believe strongly in the end justifying the means. They believe themselves to be superior to other races, and that it is their right to experiment on the lesser races if it furthers the study of magic. These guys would fit in well with Glantry if the two sides wouldn't automatically destroy each other in an arcane holocaust. They keep the other races out of Harath for their protection, as well as to avoid answering questions on why people keep disappearing in their nation. That's the Aranea. I didn't bother trying to explain what their interaction with the Red Curse was because of the continuity snarl regarding exactly where the Red Curse is located. Aranea are resistant to the curse, and they don't automatically develop legacies. In Wrath of the Immortals, during the Week of Dread, their magic fails and the curse spreads, but it's not clear how far it spreads. 2 different books in the same box set give 2 different answers. Aranea as player characters are going to be D and Fiat. Even playing them in 2nd edition requires the DM to actually come up with the rules, and the built-in abilities for Aranea would probably draw a severe XP penalty. Next week I'm looking at a uniquely Mystaran topic, tourism. Between Safari Island, Gaiety Island, the city of Serene, the Colosseum of Thyatis, and countless other locations, Mystara has a ton of places to sightsee. But who goes there? How do they go there? Do kids in Norvik pester their parents because they want to go to Barrymore World in Yalarum? But until next week, remember, just once I want to go into a cave and face normal-sized spiders.